can just use the chat.
Okay, so yeah, any questions you can use the chat. I'll be stopping in a few parts of my questions just to check the chat. A few parts of my slides. So yeah, I'll be sharing my screen now. Hopefully you all can see it. Yeah, so this is our beautiful logo. So the cell, that's the topic today. So the cell, like I said, is a basic building block of a human body and essentially any living thing from plants to animals. So there's many different parts to a cell that all basically control the basic functions of life, whether it's movement or doing any chemical reactions. The cell has a lot of different parts that regulate that and kind of organize that. And finally, before we move on to the next slide, just so you guys know, different body parts have different types of cells. So that basically means anytime you refer to a cell in the stomach, you would call that a stomach cell, or a cell in the lung cell. So that's basically like what it means. So like all cells in any body part will generally have the same type of will have the same organelles, but there might be some differences, such as different parts of the cell. There might be some differences, such as different amounts of a part of the cell. But yeah, and then this is how you can think of a cell organized in your body. So you start off with the cell, and if you guys don't know what tissues are or organs are, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, it all basically builds up to your full organ system, and then leads to our organism like us. So why are cells important to the body? So obviously we know that they make us up, so they have to be important, but we'll go a bit more specific. So first of all, they control all of the functions of our bodies. So when it comes to different chemical reactions, such as converting our food into energy or stuff like that, the cell will basically have different parts that control all of these functions. And one specific function is making proteins. So proteins are very, very important in our bodies, and a cell has different parts that make these proteins. So that's one of the very important functions that a cell controls. So we will talk about proteins in our next slide, but for now, just know that proteins are a type of molecule that are very, very important. And finally, a few parts of the cell also store some material that's used to encode traits. So right now, I just want to put in the chat how many people know what that material might be called. I'll stop sharing real quick just so I can see the chat because it's hard for me to see it. The question is, how many people know what the material inside of a cell is called that basically codes for different traits? It's perfectly fine if you don't know it. I'm just checking. I'll give it a couple of minutes. Oh, someone got it. Yes, correct. It's DNA. Good job. Good job, Debbie. So yeah, a lot of people are saying it. Good job. Yeah, nice, Ryan. I think Dominic, it's actually called DNA, but I don't know if that was a typo, but yeah, nice try. But yeah, good job, everyone. So yeah, we'll go back to our, see a lot of people putting DNA, but yeah, good job, everyone. So we'll go back to our slides. So yeah, some parts of the cell have DNA that's why it's important, because it encodes for all of our traits, such as black hair or brown eyes. So now we'll go a bit more into proteins, because like I said, it's a very important function. And because it does have a lot of different functions, such as movements or making chemical reactions occur faster and help preventing us from getting sick. So this is kind of how a protein would look like in the end, this bottom right picture. But these are the different levels of protein structures. And although you don't need to really put all of your attention in memorizing protein structures, just know that this is how the ending would look like, the quaternary structure. And if you want, and this is just a fun fact, but if you want to know about memorize how the primary structure would look like, it kind of looks like a necklace, if you can see, with a bunch of different beads. And yeah, they all basically come together to form the quaternary structure. And that has a lot of different functions. And one more thing about proteins is that they are made up of amino acids. So all in the primary structure, we see these kind of beads. Those are all called amino acids, which are coded through DNA. And these are all linked together in order to form a distinct shape. So once again, proteins have a lot of different functions, which is why it's very important, and they are made up of amino acids. So now, before I go into a bit more about the parts of each cell, there's one more thing I would like to make sure that you guys know, because it's very important. Plants and animals have different types of cells. So a lot of these parts may seem the same, but there are quite a few differences. So something you can note is that they have a bit of a different cell shape structure, and some of the parts that are noted here are kind of different, such as the plant cell has a chloroplast, which we don't really see in animal cells. So I think chloroplast is one of the main key differences, but there are a lot of differences between plant cells and animal cells. So before I go into the parts of the cell, does anyone have any quick questions? Okay, so I think someone asked what is DNA. I know a lot of people answered it, and I really appreciate that. That's very nice. But yeah, DNA is basically what kind of codes for our traits. So if I'm assuming we're having if future biology lessons, I'll talk a bit more about DNA because I do have another slide for that. But yeah, DNA is basically it's a structure that kind of has a lot of that kind of makes up our traits. And I'll go a bit more into it when we talk about the part of the cell that has DNA inside of it. But yeah, it's also called deoxyribonucleic acid. And yeah, that's the basic idea. It codes for our traits. Any other questions? Is an immune system in the blood cell, but it is a white blood cell. So an immune system is basically kind of a type of organ system. And yeah, it does contain, and white blood cells is a different type of cell, and it is a part of the immune system. So immune system, there's a lot to it, but yeah, a white blood cell is definitely a part of the immune system. Okay, so I think most questions are answered. So we'll be going to our next few slides. Okay. So now let's talk about the parts of a cell. So these parts are called organelles. So organelles are basically kind of like small bodies or compartments in a cell, and they have a lot of different functions for each one. So some of these would have DNA that codes for traits, and some of them would help make proteins, and there's a lot of different functions. There's a lot of organelles, but we're going to be going only into about 7, I think. So yeah, and one more important thing is that structure always leads to function. So these organelles have a specific structure or like something or kind of look a specific way for a reason. It's because that these help with their function that they need to do. And some of these organelles are part of an endomembrane system. We don't have to memorize the name, but that's basically what happens when they try to make proteins and transport them. So some of these organelles work together to make and transport proteins. So the next three I'm going to be talking about are not necessarily called organelles, but they are important parts of the cell. So first off is the cell membrane. The cell membrane is on the outside of the cell, and over here, as you can see, the black arrow is pointed at the end of the cell, is at the cell membrane. So in animal cells, this will be the most outer layer of the cell. Plant cells, they have another outer layer, and as you can see over here, it says cell wall. We'll go more into that in a bit, but the cell membrane is the outer layer of animal cells. And its main function is to support the inside of the cell and help maintain its shape. So without the cell membrane, all of these organelles will be just floating around. So that's why the cell membrane is extremely important. It'll help support the cell and maintain its shape. Another important function is that it's selectively permeable. Selectively permeable means that it allows specific substances to go inside of the cell and others are not able to. So in a cell, there are actually a few substances such as water that has to go inside to help perform functions to help organelles perform some functions. So water would need to go inside the cell. The cell membrane is what helps the water go inside the cells, and other substances such as some poisonous substance prevent from not being able to go inside. So it's selectively permeable. So some of the substances that are substances that are following the specific criteria, it'll go inside of the cell, but the cell membrane will prevent others that don't follow that criteria. Next up is the cytoplasm. Again, this is also not technically an organelle, but it is an important part. So the cytoplasm is a gel-like fluid that surrounds all of these organelles and supports them. So you can think of the cytoplasm as kind of the water in a swimming pool, and all of these organelles kind of like us. And without water, there's really nothing. It's really not a pool. So that's why the cytoplasm is important. It kind of supports our bodies. The water kind of supports it kind of supports these organelles just like water supports our bodies in a swimming pool. So also some processes do occur in the cytoplasm, such as protein synthesis. So generally, this doesn't mean that the cytoplasm doesn't make proteins, but there are some free-floating organelles in the cytoplasm that helps with this process. So that's why we would say that cytoplasm does help with some of the processes, important functions in a cell. Finally, we have the cell wall as our next, not really organelle, but important part of a cell. So the cell wall is the very outer layer of plant cells. So it is outside of the cell membrane, and it is only in plant cells. So in animal cells, the outer layer is a cell membrane, not the cell wall. So but it does have a pretty similar function for the cell, just like the cell membrane. It does support the cell and helps maintain its shape. So it prevents any organelles from flowing out, but it gives the plant cells a little bit more of a thicker, cell. So it will kind of help it have an extra support. So it's the same, it has similar functions as a cell membrane, but it's only in plant cells and it's the very outer layer in only plant cells. So I know I'm stopping for quite a few questions, but I saw quite a few people talking in the chat. So I'm just going to see if we have any extra questions. So I think one question we see is, what is a cell? I think someone asked. So if you're joining a bit late, the cell is basically kind of the basic building block of a human body. I won't go over the full presentation, but try to see if you can catch up. But if not, I'll answer any questions about anything more questions in the end. But yeah, just for now, the cell is the basic building block of a human body. And I appreciate people who are helping out answer that questions. How many cells does a body have? I am not exactly sure, but I'm sure it's more than a billion or trillion, because the cell basically makes all of us up. So it has, and they're very microscopic. They're very microscopic. So you have to use a microscope in order to see them. So there's probably more than a trillion. Yeah, a lot of people are saying 30 trillion. So thank you. So yeah, it's basically going to be a lot because there's very microscopic and we are very big organisms. So we need trillions of cells to make us up. And yes, thank you, Maida. But yeah, this cytoplasm was the yellow part. Okay, I think that's all our questions. And if you are raising your hand, please type your question in the chat. Okay, so we'll move on to organelles. So these are the 7 organelles that we're going to be talking about today: the nucleus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, chloroplasts, and vacuoles. So these are the main ones in a plant cell, because some of these are not in animal cells. So these are the main ones that we're going to be talking about today. Now, there's a lot of them. So such as the amyloplasts, which we're not covering today, but there's going to be a lot of different organelles, but these are the main 7, I believe, that are important to talk about. So first up, we have the nucleus. The nucleus can be thought of as the brain of a cell. It contains all of the DNA. So this is the organelle that will contain our DNA that encodes for our traits. So basically, the important function of the nucleus is to control the different activity of our cell, because the DNA does have a lot, does code our traits, including kind of regulating all of the functions in our cell. So that's why this nucleus is important. It basically kind of, like the brain, controls the full functions of the cell, just like the brain controls our bodies. So the last thing I want to talk about is that DNA is basically kind of formed into genes, which codes for different traits, but we kind of went over that. But the DNA is going to be stored in chromosome structures in our nucleus. So this is how a chromosome looks like, but just basically kind of coiled up DNA that eventually forms a structure. And the chromosome structures will be the ones that are in our nucleus. Next up, we have the ribosomes. So the ribosomes are known as protein factories. So these basically mean that they're the ones that make proteins. So these are small circular organelles that can either be inside of the cytoplasm or on the nucleus. So these ribosomes kind of link amino acids together in order to form proteins. So that's basically why they're called the protein factories. There's going to be a bunch of different amino acids that are being made, but the ribosome is the one that makes the proteins by linking all of these amino acids together. Amino acids, again, are the smaller part, are basically like kind of the beads of a necklace, like the smaller parts of a protein. And yeah, ribosomes can either be in the cytoplasm, which we talked about is the gel-like fluid that supports the cell, and it's the yellow part, or in the endoplasmic reticulum, which we're going to get into right now. So right now we don't see a picture, but I'll be showing a picture of the endoplasmic reticulums in the next slide. But yeah, endoplasmic reticulum basically is a sac of different membranous tubules or kind of tubes right next to the nucleus. So there are 2 types of endoplasmic reticulum, rough ER and smooth ER. So these 2 have very different functions, which is why I didn't exactly go into the functions yet. But both of them have a similar structure, which is the different membranous tubes. So first off is the rough ER. The rough ER is what has ribosomes in it. So like it says here, this ribosomes can either be in the cytoplasm or endoplasmic reticulum. It can be in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So the main function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum is to kind of leak proteins or secrete them out of the cell that have been produced by the ribosomes inside this on the endoplasmic reticulum. So like I mentioned before, structure leads to function, which is why it's important to note that this membranous tube structure is helping separate the proteins produced by ribosomes on the rough ER and the ones produced on the cytoplasm. So like I mentioned before, there are ribosomes in the cytoplasm, but they can also produce proteins which have a bit of a different function and are moved to other places other than the ones that are produced by the ones in rough ER. So that's why the structure that is important. And the overall function, again, of the rough ER is to help secrete the proteins made by ribosomes and move them to the right place. And most of the time, these ones will be moving out of the cell. So the other type of endoplasmic reticulum is the smooth ER. The smooth ER doesn't have any ribosomes on it. So this doesn't have to do with protein transports. So the main functions of these are quite different. So these will make lipids, which are basically another type of big molecule, and these are otherwise known as fats or oils or waxes. So those are also very important to our body for like maintaining, kind of supporting it. So that's why the smooth ER is also important. It will make these lipids. Another important function is detoxifying poisons and drugs. And I'm sure most of you can understand why that's important. But It's basically kind of removing all the toxins out of different poisons or drugs if we accidentally digest them. So this is how both the rough ER and smooth ER look like and on the cell. So this rough ER, you can see there's a lot of different ribosomes that are studded on it, while the smooth ER has none. But both of them have these membranous tubes, so they're kind of these tube-like structures. So that's why both of them have similar structures, but this one doesn't have any ribosomes. And on the cell, they're both right next to the nucleus. So the rough ER is right here, and the smooth ER is a bit further, but it's next to the rough ER. So I'll move on to the next organelle before taking any questions. Next one is Golgi Apparatus. So the Golgi Apparatus is also a part of the endomembrane system, or transporting and modifying proteins. The main function of the Golgi is to modify these proteins. So they have a similar structure to the endoplasmic reticulum, which is kind of like this stack of membranous tubes, which is kind of similar to what you see here. So the main function is to modify these proteins. So sometimes in the protein making process, there can be a lot of different mistakes. So that's why it has to go to the Golgi apparatus to make sure that these proteins are made correctly and kind of transported to the right places. So what it does, it adds chemical tags to these proteins. So it can move correctly inside the cell or outside of the cell. So think of it as a principal assigning you to different classrooms. So it'll basically say like one person move to this class, move to like room 209, or another one move to 210. So that's kind of similar to what the Golgi is doing. It's adding different chemical tags to make sure that the proteins move to the correct places in the cell so that there won't be any harm done to your body. And one more thing that it does is packaging the proteins. So it basically goes into different vesicles which bud off or kind of move out of the Golgi apparatus, and those vesicles will be containing the different proteins so that it'll be in a safe space to move to wherever it needs to. So now I'll take a couple of questions before moving on. What is detoxify? So detoxify, I think someone else answered it, so thank you so much, but I'll just quickly go over it one more time. Detoxify is basically removing any toxic substances or kind of removing them out of the poison so that you'll be prevented from getting sick. So sometimes if you kind of digest these poisons, digest these poisons, it tends to do a lot of harmful effects to your body. So these toxins need to be removed in order to make sure that your body is safe. Are there any cells that fight viruses? So there are actually quite a few cells in your immune system, which is another organ system that fights off these viruses, or kind of helps fight off these viruses, not necessarily directly, but it does help a lot. Yeah, T cells, those are different types of cells in your immune system that help. But yeah, good question. I think we have one in the Q&A. Someone asked, how many cells do we have in our body? Again, it's about 1 trillion cells. So there are a lot of different cells. They're very microscopic, and we are big organisms. So we have to have a lot of different. There has to be a lot of different cells in order for us to make a lot. For us to be made up. So more than 1 trillion. Oh, I think a lot of you guys have questions about the immune system. So we can talk a bit more about that after we finish the lesson. But for now, we'll move on to the next slides. Let me just pull it up. Okay. So next up, we're going to be talking about the mitochondria. So unlike the past few organelles that we were talking about, this one doesn't have as much to do with proteins. The mitochondria has more to do with energy. So it's known as a powerhouse of the cell, which means that it's the one that helps convert any food that you've eaten into energy. So that's why it's kind of like helping you gain more energy like a powerhouse would. So This process of, so whenever you digest some food, it'll go through mitochondria, and the mitochondria will go through a process called cellular respiration. So cellular respiration is basically a process in which it converts their food molecules, otherwise known as glucose, which are kind of like the sugars, which is also known as sugars, but don't get confused with actual sugar. The sugars are basically kind of our food molecules, and it'll convert it into a molecule called ATP, which is the one that stores energy. So this energy is so we're kind of convert this basic process of converting all the food molecules from the food we eat into energy through ATP. So that's why mitochondria is important. It helps us gain more energy, and it doesn't create energy. That's an important point, because you should know that energy is never created or destroyed. It's only converted from our food. That's why it's important to have foods with a lot of high in nutrients so that we get a lot of different energy. So next up is chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are only in plant cells. So we saw the differences between a plant cell and an animal cell. That's because the plant cell is what? It's because the plant cell is, the animal cell have a lot of different organelles. So the chloroplast is one of the organelles that's only in a plant cell, but not in an animal cell. And that's because photosynthesis is occurring in a plant cell. So photosynthesis is kind of the opposite of cellular respiration. This is where energy is converted into food. So it goes through a process called, so photosynthesis has a lot of different steps, but the overall process is basically any energy the plant gets from sunlight or sunlight, water, or sunlight and water, and any of the other reactants. It'll basically be converted into food through a couple of different steps. And as many of us know, we are not the ones that make food. Plants make food for us. So that's why this is only in the that's why chloroplasts are only in plant cells, because those are the organisms that make food. Another important part is that chloroplasts also contain a pigment called chlorophyll, which is basically what makes our plant green. So that's why a lot of the plants we see are green plants, because they have chlorophyll. And some plants that are orange or red, such as the ones you see in the fall, they have different pigments that make them orange and red. But all of these pigments that make plant-specific colors, such as green, are contained in the chloroplast. I think we have one more organelle before we go on to our next set. So the last one we're going to be talking about is the vacuole. So the vacuole is both in plant and animal cells, but there's a bit of a difference. Plants have a really big vacuole. As you can see, it's the blue part in this plant cell. But animal cells have very, very small vacuoles. So in this top right picture, you can see that animals have a lot of smaller vacuoles that are used for storage. So the main function of a vacuole is basically storing any waste in animal cells and kind of helping cells maintain shape for plant cells. So anytime we digest our food, there's also going to be a lot of different waste that we have to excrete out. But the vacuole will help store that waste in order to kind of help us gain any nutrients or water, gain any nutrients. So sometimes that's why it's important in plant cells, because it will help store any waste that we have from our food. But in plant cells, there's also a really big vacuole that it does help with the same thing, storing waste from kind of storing any nutrients or waste from waste in the plant in the vacuole. But because it's so big, it will also help maintain shape and water balance. So without this vacuole, this plant cell will kind of look a lot different, because there's going to be a lot of empty space. So there's plants, so kind of the vacuole will help make sure that the plant cell is in the shape that it needs to be. And it will help maintain water balance when water enters the cell. It's going to kind of help make sure that there's enough water, but there's not too much water. So it helps balance that out. And yes, it's much smaller in animal cells. So I'll take a few questions before we move on to our game. So let's see. Are chloroplasts in human cells? So humans are basically animals, and chloroplasts are only contained in plant cells because because chloroplasts are basically where photosynthesis is taking place, which helps make food. And since humans don't make food but plants do, chloroplasts are only contained in plant cells, not animal cells. Are human cells the same as animal cells or plant cells? So human cells are basically the same as animal cells because humans are also different types of animals. So that's why it's basically the human cell. Converts to glucose. Oh, I see some jokes. Oh yeah, that's funny. Hulk has the chloroplast because it's green. I see a few of you are raising hands. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat because we're not able to unmute you guys. Okay, now we'll be moving on to our quick game, but let me just double check that we have all of the stuff all of our parts we need for the game online. I think we should be good. Okay. I'll pull up the presentation so we can begin our game. Okay. So this is a quick summary of everything we covered. So you can just go through it, but I'll just say it out loud real quick. So cells are the basic building blocks of all living beings. And I'm sure you guys have that memorized right now because I've said it so many times. So they have many different organelles that help make and transport proteins, but that's not the only organelles that are there. So these include the nucleus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, and the Golgi apparatus. And this part, I'm completely sorry. You don't need to worry about that. I did not cover that. So just ignore this one. So now time for a little fun game. And we're not going to be using minions in this game, but I just added it for fun. So our game is going to be called Let's Make a Cell. So in this specific format, we're not able to give you guys numbers, but I'm going to be asking you guys questions about different cell structures and about different cell organelles. And you're going to be given one question about each of the organelles we covered on both structure and function. So for this time, I'll just be taking hands. But if I call on you, you will be answering in the chat by I'm not sure if you guys can privately answer to me or to me, but you guys will be answering in the chat privately to me. So if you're able to answer it correctly, I will be having a model of a cell in privately because I'm not able to properly share it online because otherwise I'll give some of the answers away. But you guys will be able to answer any questions about the cell structures. And if you guys are correct, I will be adding different part for each both structure and function for each of the organelles. I'll be adding parts of each organelle in order for it to be the full cell. So this is how our final cell will ideally look like. Some of the parts are not going to be in it, such as the amyloplast, but it's perfectly fine if it's not. Not only because you guys are in a learning process, so sometimes if you guys get a question wrong, it's perfectly fine because we're still learning about this. We're still just started learning it. But also sometimes organelles will not have a sufficient amount. Some cells will not have a sufficient amount of an organelle. So sometimes it will have only a part of the organelle. And that's okay because some cells do have that, and that's really there in some humans. So yeah, this is how our cell will ideally look like in the end, and you guys will be seeing it once we finish the full game. So we have 7 questions to be answered. So let me just get started. So the first question will be about the cell membrane, and this will be the structure. So my first question is, which of the following looks more like a cell membrane surrounding a plant cell, not an animal cell, but the plant cell? And please remember how the plant cell looks like. Okay, I see 2. Oh, sorry, my screen. Okay, so I'll wait for a couple of more answers. Okay, I think we have quite a few. So the correct answer is this one. So the square one is gonna be correct. So because a majority of you were able to get this the correct answer, you guys will be getting it correct. And if you get it wrong, the organelle will not be sufficiently added. So if you get one of the questions wrong, you will not have the full organelle needed, but you will have a little bit. And if you get both of them wrong, you will not have the organelle at all. And if you get both of them correct, you will have the full organelle in your cell. And yes, majority of you got this correct answer. So good job. So far, right now you have the square. Right now you have a part of the cell membrane. So next up is which of the following is not a function of the cell membrane? So I will give you a couple of minutes to answer it. Okay, so I think we have quite a few of you who answered. So the correct answer is C. Because cell membrane isn't necessarily directly helping the ribosome and endoplasmic reticulum. So it will be outside of, because it's kind of supporting the cell. And I think a lot of you answered A. So remember, the cell membrane is selectively permeable. So it's only allowing a few of the cells to enter the cell, a few of the substances to enter the cell. So that's why A would still be correct. So right now, your status is that you only have you only have part of the cell membrane. So this will mean that the cell membrane will not be fully surrounding the cell. Will be kind of very borderline between the cytoplasm. So next up, we're going to be talking about the cytoplasm. So which of the following would look more like a cytoplasm? So I also for the private answer, I think that some of you are not able to, so that's okay. I'm not gonna answer. I'm not gonna tell you guys the answer until most of you put it down. But yeah, also if you're raising your hand, please put it in the chat. I'll wait for a couple of. Okay, I think we have a sufficient amount of people, and whoever answered 1 is correct. So I think majority of you were able to answer it, so you guys will get part of the cytoplasm. because the cytoplasm doesn't necessarily kind of go over the cell membrane like this. It's kind of surrounding it, so you should still be able to see the cell membrane. So I will give you guys that because majority of you got it correct. So the next one, which of the processes takes place in a cytoplasm? Again, some of these processes won't be the cytoplasm doing it, but these processes will take place if there's like some organelles in it, if there's some like close organelles. Have a couple of answers. Let's wait a few more minutes. Meantime, I'll just plug in my charger. Okay, I think we have enough answers, and the correct answer is A. So A is because the free-floating ribosomes inside the cytoplasm can actually make proteins. And while this isn't exactly the cytoplasm making proteins, it's more close to the other it's closer than the other answers because the ribosomes are exactly free-floating, so they're right inside the cytoplasm. Water transport will be the ones for the cell membrane because it's kind of helping water get inside the cell. Lipid synthesis is the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and photosynthesis is the chloroplast. So I think you had a few, but I think most of you guys answered B. So unfortunately, you will only be getting part of the cytoplasm. But good job. Good try, everyone. So I think a few of you have answered a few of you have answered multiple answers. So make sure you answer one time and be sure of it before you're answering. Next up, we're going to be talking about the cell wall. So which of the following between the two arrows would be the cell wall? So is it this one or this one? And this is going to be in a plant cell. So so this will be 1 and this will be 2. So 2 is going to be this area and 1 will be this area. Okay, so I think we have enough. So the correct answer would be 1, this area. So I think that we had about half and a half, but I see a few more people answering 1, so I will give it to you. So the cell wall in the plant cell is a very outer layer of a cell, so it's going to be that very outer layer, this one. So right now you have part of the cell wall, so let's hope that this time you can get the full cell wall. True or false, the cell wall is found in every single cell, so you can just put T or F. Okay. think I see enough people. Last second. Okay, so the correct answer is false. It's not found in every single cell. It's only found in plant cells. So unfortunately, I think I've seen most of them being true. So I'm sorry, guys, but you guys will only be getting part of the cell wall. I think most of them were true. So yeah, I'm sorry, guys. So hopefully next time we'll get the full one, and I'm sure you guys can do it this time. And it's totally fine if you're not, because this is a learning process also. But let's try our best. So which of the following looks more like a nucleus? One or two? This is two. And remember what exactly is around. So this isn't exactly like the shape of the nucleus, because both of them are the same. But what's around the nucleus? Is there nothing around the nucleus, or is a lot of stuff around the nucleus? This is one and this is two. Okay, I think we have enough. Yeah, this should be good. So the correct answer is number two. So I know this was a confusing one because both of them are the exact same shape, but the nucleus the endoplasmic reticulum is surrounding the nucleus. So that's why this would be number two, because this one has nothing around it, but the endoplasmic reticulum should be around the nucleus. So this one was a bit of a tricky one, and I think I see most people putting two, so I will give it to you guys. So good job. So next function question for the nucleus. What is another name for the nucleus? So think of its functions. So like, what are the functions similar to? Okay, I think we have enough. And the correct answer is, and most of you have put this one, so good job, B. So if you remember, this nucleus regulates a lot of the functions because it has the DNA. So just like the brain controls our bodies or regulates our functions, the nucleus controls the cell. So that's why it's called B. So right now, I believe you guys have part of the nucleus, because the first one, most of you put one, but that's okay, because part of the nucleus is still really good, because some of these are tricky questions. So good job, guys. So right now it's part of the nucleus. Next up is the ribosome. So which of the following looks more like a ribosome? And there is a little bit of a trick. So I'm just going to say there's more than two possible answers. There's not more, it's not just one and two. There's a little bit of a trick. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it might be 410. 410 for me. So yeah, thank you so much. I think it might go up to 410. Okay, so I think most of you are putting two. And the trick is that from the outside, the ribosome will look like this. So in most like cell diagrams, the ribosome will look like this. But actually, if you look closer, this is how a ribosome would look like, with the proteins and kind of the squares. So if you remember from our previous slide on the ribosome, let me just see if I can pull it up. This is kind of how a ribosome from up close looks like. But I will still give it to you guys because this was a very tricky one. And if you if you put either answer, you would have still been correct. So I will give it to you guys. So good job. So, what is the main function of the ribosome? A, B, C, or D? This isn't the trick. Okay, so I think we have enough answers. So the correct answer is C, to make proteins. Because if you remember, the ribosome's job is to link different parts of the proteins together, which are called amino acids, in order to make them. So I think most of you put C. I see one person who put like a bunch of C's. So I think I'll give that to you guys. It was between C and A, but I think I saw a bit more closely to C. So you guys got the full ribosome. So really good job. Next up is the ER. Sorry, I just need to get the chat back. I'll share my screen in just a minute. Okay, now we're good. Which of the following looks more like the smooth endoplasmic reticulum? So 1 or 2? Oh, if you guys have to leave now, I understand it's 7 o'clock. So thank you so much for joining if you guys have to leave. And I hope you guys enjoyed the lesson. Okay, I see quite a few. Bye, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed. Okay, so I think we have enough answers. So let's see. The correct answer is number 2. So honestly, both of these kind of look similar, but if you can see, the rough endoplasmic reticulum kind of has a bit more of a straightforward shape from the previous slide cell model we had. But this one also has membranous tubes, but it has a bit more of a different shape. So it kind of has a bit more circular, if you know what I mean. So that's why this would be the correct answer. And I think I see quite a few of you who put 2, so I will give it to you. So good job. So we have part of this endoplasmic reticulum. So let's see if we can get the full one. So next one is a function question. So which of the following would be the main difference between the function of the rough and smooth ER? And there are 2 answers. So you have to answer. So if most of you answer at least one of the answers, I will give it to you. Okay, we'll wait for a couple of more minutes. Or not even minutes, just like 30 seconds. Okay, so I think we're running a little bit out of time, so we're gonna be, so I will say the answers. So it's both A and C. So both of them are yes answers because the roughy R is more focused on the endomembrane system and with moving proteins, while the smoothie R has different functions and detoxifies poisons and makes lipids. So I think most of you put A and a lot of you put A and C as well. So this will be the correct answer for you guys. So right now you guys all have the full smooth and roughy R. So good job. Next up is the Golgi Apparatus. So which of the following looks more like a Golgi apparatus? And think about the function of it. So this is 1 and this is 2. Okay, so we're running a little bit out of time, so I'll answer it now. The correct answer is number 2. So both of these are pretty similar, but so in order to like kind of secrete the proteins out of the cell once they're done modifying it, they'll need the Golgi apparatus needs a little bit of space. And as you saw in the picture, there was like a little bit of space between each of the different sacs. So that's why it would be number 2, but this was a bit of a confusing question because they both look very, very similar. And I think most of you answered number 2, so really good job. So I will give that to you guys. So right now you have a bit of the Golgi apparatus, but to get the full one, you will have to answer this full question. Answer this true or false question correctly. It's true or false. And read the full question before you answer it. Okay, a few more minutes. Okay, so our correct answer is false. So it does modify and add chemical tags, but it'll do that also if these proteins need to be transported around the cell or out of the cell. So add some chemical tags if it needs to go to a different place or if it needs to go to a different organelle. So I think most of you got false. So I will give it to you guys. So really good job. I think most of you did. Yeah, I think a lot of you got false. So I'll give it to you guys. So next up is the Golgi apparatus. It's the mitochondria, sorry. So which of the following look like more like mitochondria? And remember the picture that I showed you. Remember all of the parts of the picture. 1 or 2? Okay, I think we have enough. The correct answer is number 2. So if you remember in our mitochondria picture, there was actually some DNA inside of it. And there's a very interesting reason why, but unfortunately we do not have too much time, but if you want me to answer it real quick, we can do that at the end. But yeah, in the mitochondria, there's actually going to be some DNA inside of it. So, and this is it's not the best picture, but this is supposed to be the DNA. So function question. Which of the following is correct about mitochondria? Okay, I see a couple of you answered it. Let's see a few more. Okay, so the correct answer is C. So unfortunately, I saw no C's, but that's okay. So, so I think this one, it's also in plant cells. Photosynthesis is in chloroplasts, and the power tower is actually powerhouse. That one's a tricky one, but yeah, it's always going to be known as the powerhouse. And C, so cellular respiration is where it takes place because remember, mitochondria is associated with energy, and cellular respiration is what converts food into energy. So right now, I believe you guys have part of the mitochondria. So good job. That's already pretty good. So I think we have a couple of more organelles, just one more minute. So which of the following looks more like a chloroplast? I think we'll skip over the last one because we don't have too much time. And I don't think I'll have time to show you the full cell model. So I apologize for that. Okay, so the correct answer is number 1. So number 1 is because these different membranes, if you remember from our picture of the chloroplast, a lot of these so these membranes are kind of stacks. So these different structures over here are kind of stacks. These are called thylakoids, and they're basically stacked together rather than separated, rather than like kind of surrounding part. So that's the main reason why. So if you want, you can look closely at these organelles in order to memorize it. So last question, because I don't think we'll have time for the vacuole question. How does a chloroplast make a plant green? You basically just have to look at these parts. Just these questions. Okay, so the correct answer is A. And I think most of you have been able to get that one, so I will give it to you. Yes, there's a pigment called chlorophyll. Betaphil and eosinophil are other pigments, but they're not the ones that make it green. I think they make it other colors. I'm not exactly sure. I won't tell you because I don't want to give you misinformation. But yeah, it's called chlorophyll, which is making it green. So it's 7:11 already. So 4:11 in your time. So unfortunately, we won't have time to go over the cell model that we made and the vacuole. But from what I have seen, but the summary of it is that we have a lot of organelles. All of them are created, but most of them have only one part of it. So it hasn't been the full one, but we have a couple of them, such as the ribosome and the endoplasmic reticulum, which we have the full organelle created. So that's basically done it for the full lesson today. So right now, if you guys have a little bit of time, I can take any questions, but if not, feel free to sign off. I'm really excited. I'm really happy I got to teach you guys today. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to see you guys in future programs. So thank you so much for joining. And you guys are all very smart kids. I saw a lot of that in the chat, asking very insightful questions. You're welcome.
If there are no questions, we'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you so much, Kirti, for being with us. Thank you, Mayhan, who is she was our teacher last time, and she is in charge of the Science is Fun program. So I do want to remind you all that the Science is Fun program is available at many libraries throughout the Silicon Valley. But here, let me turn on my camera too. Otherwise, thank you everybody for being here today. Thank you so much to Medha and Kirti for joining us and spending this is their time that they're volunteering to be with you guys today and to teach younger kids about science. So thank you everybody, and we'll see you again next month, hopefully. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.